I remember when everything changed. I went from growing up in Nigeria to where everything was simple, where I knew who I was, to come to America, where I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Leaving my mom was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. Just the thought of leaving her and my grandfather. My grandfather was my right-hand man. It was something tough, something that I felt like I couldn't just leave behind. It's everything I'd known because I wasn't just leaving a place. I was leaving the only version of myself I knew. Once everything was set in stone, I remember taking a seat. I remember the takeoff. I remember flying over the ocean and just kind of being scared and overwhelmed at the same time. The food smelled different. It tastes different. The weather was different. The people moved different. To me, it felt like there was no sense of community like I had back home. Although everything looked better, it just didn't feel better to me at the time. Simplicity was what I had grown and known about. Having a strong accent, people didn't understand me as I talked or shared different ideas. I felt out of place everywhere I went. I'm being taken to the desert industries where now it's called the Goodwill, shop around for clothes, and getting a Game Boy, one of the fat Game Boys that had the Mario on it. It was like one of the clear ones. You could see all the wires and everything inside of it. I remember it was just something that was just different to me. I remember being placed in school, just sitting there just trying to figure out everything, just so shocked culturally, trying to figure out my sense of identity, figure out where I belong, just figure out what was going on. I was literally overwhelmed. Everything was completely different. The school structure was different. The environment was different, just trying to figure it out. School day to day, just still trying to figure out how to talk to my family at the time because I was in a whole nother country without my family around those things. And so I remember going through school, trying to figure things out, being socially talked about, looked upon like I was different. Spending the first several months just kind of trying to figure things out. I would go outside, play, be by myself. Felt like I was isolated from everybody because I didn't fit in. People looked at me different. When I would talk, they'd look at me or make fun of the way I talk. So I just kind of kept to myself. As months and months progressed, we had a couple of incidences that happened. So I was supposed to get picked up from school, and I didn't get picked up from school. And one of the counselors called the police to report me as neglected and abandoned as a child. And so Officer Edwards came over to the school and picked me up, and I rode in his patrol vehicle home. And I remember getting home, and some things happened that night that for whatever reason, Officer Edwards stayed at home. Outside the door of the home, as he heard some screaming and yelling, he started banging on the door and demanding to see me. And after that, I remember him coming to the house and taking a look, and I said, okay. So he left that night. This was several months after that. He left that night, and I remember the next morning at school, this is where everything just kind of hit different. Getting bussed to the principal's office. And I remember going up there and walking in the room, and there was a lot of people in the office. They had all the nameplates and name badges, and I could tell you all their names and everything to this day. I sat there just looking around like just overwhelmed, like what are all these people doing? So they all called me in the room and started asking me questions. Started trying to figure out where was all my scars coming from, interrogating me. I felt like I did something wrong, like I had committed a crime or did something, but I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. And so they kept on questioning me. I felt like I was getting interrogated. I had fear. I was confused. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. I said I was just a 10-year-old boy. I felt like I was just being interrogated. I just didn't understand why, And so I sat there just trying to answer the questions as best I could. I just told them I fell from jungle gym or I tripped from soccer. And they kept on doing it. It kept on going on day by day. And that same day, they told me that I would not be going home. So I was like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm not going home. And I said, if I'm not going home, I'd rather go see my mom. You guys need to figure out where my mother was. I remember them saying, yeah, we're trying to figure out where your mother is at. And I said, okay, well, you need to do it immediately. So they said, we'll let you know. So that night they told me that I was not going home, that I was going to a shelter. And so to me, I was like, what is a shelter? I had no idea about it. So after school that day, after the after school program, they picked me up and took me to shelter, which is like a halfway home where boys and girls or different homes kind of go in between before they get to different homes or they find homes for them. And so I went to the shelter that night and, they gave me some clothes that were too short and things like that. Obviously, I was a grown little kid, so I was a little bit taller than most people at the time. And so I got some clothes, I got a couple of things, but when I left home, I didn't have anything. I didn't have any clothes that I came with. I didn't have my backpack. I didn't have anything at all. So, I was in the shelter that night, and I remember we went through the routine. We got to the shelter, you do a little activity, you eat a snack, and you get ready for bed. You know, if you had homework, you knock out your homework. Or we had a movie night. Like, what is this? You know, just laying in bed, just lost. And trying to figure out how I can get in contact with my mother or my grandfather. You know, I couldn't just pick up the phone and call them. I was lost. You know, I was a kid just trying to figure out what was going on, why all these people are talking to me, why all these questions were happening, like if I did something wrong. So that went on for a while, several weeks. And then every day I'll show up to school. I continued getting interrogated, kept on getting asked some questions. And there was one girl that I met in the shelter. Her name was Allie. She used to take me outside and try to teach me how to shoot basketball in the little hoop we had. And she told me that, she said, you're going to be somebody special one day. And you just don't see it just yet. And I remember that to this day. You know, I was like, okay. I remember I would go to school at D Elementary. And so I remember one day I showed up to school. And I was there and I got bussed to the principal's office again out of class. And so here I was again thinking there's more interrogations. And they said, somebody's on the phone for you. And so I was like, okay, like, who could it be? You know, so I remember picking up the phone. And when I picked up the phone, and it was my mom, like, she just said, you know, she called my name, and I said, oh man, just hearing her voice just kind of sent chills through my body, because that's the first time I've spoken to her since I've been back to America. And months have passed since. You know, I didn't get to call her when I got here or touchdown or anything like that. That was the first time I got to talk to her. So speaking our language to her on the phone and in our native tongue, and just hearing her voice just kind of like gave me reassurance, like made me feel like I was back home again, you know, like all before coming back to America. And I remember talking to her on a three-way call. My father was on the other line as well. And the people in the office kind of started taking notice. You know, they started hearing me talk to her on the phone. And so they started kind of communicating that to the caseworkers and counselors or whatnot. So saying that I was talking to my mom on the phone because they could hear her tone on the phone. And I said that was the first time since coming to America that I felt like myself again. Just hearing that lady's voice and just how soft-spoken she was. You know, she just had this calm about her. She could just speak life into me, and she can tame that little rage that I had inside of me. Just something special about her. And I remember just like, you know, telling her mom, like, you know, I miss you. I hope to see you soon, you know, and that's kind of how everything went. So after I got out the phone call, the caseworkers and counselors kept on asking me, like, okay, how do we get in contact with your mother? And I said, I don't know. You know, I didn't have her phone number. So I just told them they're going to have to talk to my father at the time and trying to figure that out. So everything was just that way. And after that day on the phone, I'm going back to class, and we were doing arts and crafts in class. And so I remember just drawing a big heart, and I put to Mom from DJ. And so I was like, man, I miss this lady. So I kept that close to me, you know. And so after that day, we went to the shelter and got kind of settled and situated. Obviously the routine, you know, get there, eat a snack, go play activities or watch a movie or whatnot, get ready for snack, take a shower, wind down, go to sleep, then go to school the next day. That's kind of became my routine from that point on. Like I said, I just felt lost again. You know, there was nobody around me that I knew. I was just surrounded by everybody that was just new, all just new people that were not even close to me, not my family, you know. And I was like, everything was just all brand new to me. It's something I just had no recollection of. I didn't know. So I kept on asking questions like, okay, when do I get to talk to my mom again? When do I get to see my mom again? And that was kind of one of the hardest things, you know, just trying to figure out how to get in contact with my mom. Just feel like I was just a kid just reaching for my mom, you know, everything that I'd known as a kid, the life I had with my family, missing my grandfather, missing my parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles in the compound we had, just the life I had in Nigeria when everything was just so simple. That was kind of something that I kind of just dearly missed and I wanted to go back to, you know. And coming to America, it just seemed like everything was all newer. There was more things, but it just seemed like it just didn't feel like home at all. And so that's just kind of how things just kind of happened. But just when I thought life couldn't get any more confusing for me, it really did, because what came next was something that I really wasn't ready for: foster care.